Well, welcome everyone to our second TAC meeting, our Technical Advisory Committee for Summit Avenue Regional Trail Master Plan. We're excited to have this conversation. The next step here, really where we get to talk about design ideas specifically for Summit and kind of what could be and some of those benefits and drawbacks, and really just kind of think through some more of those details of what might be possible for Regional Trail and Summit Avenue. So again, I know folks are kind of trickling in, so I think it would just be good. We can start with introductions. I think last time we waited to get to the breakout rooms to introduce folks, but I think it'd just be helpful as we kind of go down this list of who's in the room. If you see an organization you're with, if you could just jump in and introduce yourself. I'll start. My name is Mary Norton. I'm a landscape architect at the City of St. Paul Parks and Recreation Department. Project manager for the Summit Avenue Regional Trail Master Plan. And we have a couple other folks here from St. Paul Parks and Rec. Brett, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Brett Husong. I'm a lead landscape architect in Parks and Recreation, and I am providing support to Mary on the project.
Great, thanks, Brett. Go ahead, Katie.
Hi, I'm Katie Hammerlink. I'm also with City of St. Paul Parks and Rec. I'm a landscape designer helping out with the project.
Thank you, Katie. And then I'll jump to our other project staff here before we kind of go through other TAC members. We have Bolton and Menk on the call as our design consultants for project management and engineering. Scott, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself first?
Hey, all, Scott McBride here, helping with project management on this project. Maddie?
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Maddie Dahlheimer, landscape architect on the project.
I guess I'll go next. Cody Christensen with Bolton and Menk, civil engineer design, multimodal design for the project.
Renee Barnes, and I'm with Bolton and Menk here to offer some historical perspective for the Summit area.
And then I'm Michaela Isaacson. I'm just here for some Zoom technical support in the background and just making sure everyone can get out to breakout rooms easily when that time comes.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone else from City Parks and Rec on the call that wants to introduce themselves? I should say design and construction. I know there's some others for Parks and Rec. If not, we'll
I just joined. I'm Tom Hagel, operations manager for Parks and Rec.
Hey, Tom, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm here, Karen Masevich, park maintenance, City of St. Paul.
Rachel Coyle, St. Paul Forestry.
And Zach Jorgensen, Parks Forestry.
Thank you. Any other Parks and Rec folks? Otherwise, we'll move on to our friends in Public Works. All right. Transportation planning and safety. Anyone from Public Works?
Morning, everyone. My name is Jimmy Shoemaker. I'm with planning, transportation planning and safety in Public Works. I think Ruben is here.
Yep. Good morning, everyone. Ruben Collins, also with transportation planning and safety. Good to be here. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. All right. Anyone from structural or traffic engineering, Public Works? I know we have some folks out, so oh, hey, Hanwen.
Hi, Hanwen Westman, traffic engineering, City of St. Paul.
Wonderful. All right. Anyone from I guess last call, Public Works? Go ahead and jump in.
Hi there, I'm Dag DeJene, Bridge Engineering, St. Paul.
Hi, Dag. How are you?
Good.
Good. Let's see. How about PED, Planning and Economic Development?
Good morning. I'm Emma Sigworth. I'm a planner in PED.
Hi, Emma.
Hi, this is Allison Eggers. I'm a senior historic preservation planner in PED.
Hi, Allison. Thanks for being here. All right. How about Parks and Natural Resources? You want to call? All right.
I came from a Teams meeting that like automatically popped up, and I know a couple people were leaving from there.
Oh, thank you.
So
Okay.
I just sent them the Zoom link, so we might be getting a couple others.
Okay, great. Appreciate it. Thanks, Allison. All right, why don't we let's see if the last call for city staff. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and shift and welcome our friends here from starting with MnDOT on the call. All right, how about SHPO?
Yeah, Sarah Beimers, Manager, Environmental Review, State Historic Preservation Office.
Hey, Sarah, thanks for being here. Mike, I think I saw you from MnDOT. You didn't miss your window if you wanted to introduce yourself.
Yep. Thanks, Mary. Mike Samuelson, pedestrian and bicycle coordinator from MnDOT Metro District.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for being here. How about the DNR? Minnesota DNR? Or National Park Service? Anyone there?
Hi, I'm Karen. I'm an outdoor recreation planner with the Mississippi National River Recreation Area.
Karen, thanks for being here. All right, Capital Region Watershed District.
Hi, Luke Martinkowski, BMP Inspector with Capital Region Watershed District.
Hey, Luke, thanks for being here. All right, let's see, Capital Area Architectural and Planning Board.
Good morning, Merritt Clapp-Smith, Executive Secretary with the CAP Board.
Hi, Merritt, thanks for being here. Ramsey County.
Luis Flores, Engineer 3 with Ramsey County.
Hi, Luis. And then Metropolitan Council, MCES, anyone on the call?
Yeah, I was having trouble unmuting myself. Roger Janzig, I'm with the Metropolitan Council Environmental Services, and I'm a wastewater planner just to make sure there isn't any project near one of our facilities.
That's good. Hey, hi, Roger. Thanks for being here. How about Metro Transit?
Good morning. This is Scott Thompson. I'm Senior Transit Planner in Service Development. Thank you.
Hi, Scott. And Community Development, Met Council.
Good morning. This is Tracy Kinney. I'm a planner with the Regional Park System.
Hi, Tracy. All right, so it's a great list. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And if you joined late, feel free to jump into, especially in the breakout sessions. Will be a little smaller groups. Feel free to make yourself at home and introduce yourself at that time. We'll kind of get rolling here. Just a little bit on the meeting framework. We mentioned, best practices. Please keep yourself on mute as we kind of go through the front end of the slides. The goal here is to kind of get through our content, big picture about the project and kind of where we're headed for a design approach, and then head to some breakout sessions where we can talk a little more specifically about kind of weigh some of the benefits and drawbacks of various concepts throughout the corridor. So please keep yourself on mute. We'll kind of go through the background here until that point, and then we can unmute at that point. The meeting will be recorded and posted afterwards, probably by the end of today, just until we get that recording back on the Engage St. Paul website. So just to note that and be able to share that as needed. We will be using a Miro whiteboard in the breakout room. So at least the facilitators in the meeting will, and as you kind of give your comments, we'll move around and capture that. And so we can do a little Q&A in the breakout sessions and when we regroup back in the main meeting. From a recording perspective, the way Zoom works, we actually can't record the breakout sessions per se. So we'll try and keep enough time here at the end that we can provide some good summary back in the main meeting room, so to speak, so that we can capture that. A little note on continuous engagement. After this meeting, there will be a follow-up survey sent to TAC participants. This was similar to what we did in February, just as a way to keep conversation going. We know that we won't certainly have all the answers here, and you may want to bounce ideas back to other groups that you're representing. So know that you'll have a follow-up opportunity after this meeting to kind of let content sink in and provide feedback from your group at that time. A little plug for a public information session. So We are planning to have a virtual information session on June 6th, open to the public. We are encouraging people to register in advance if they're able to get the link for that. They can do it right before the meeting if they need to as well. But this is a way to go ahead and share that and get people signed up for that info session. It'll be the same information shared in these meetings, but just an opportunity for more Q&A with project staff about the project. And then a central source for engagement, excuse me, is engagestpaul.org/summit. Mostly existing conditions feedback we've been getting, which is great. Through the mapping exercises, we can really kind of target how people are using the space and where their biggest concerns are. And that'll continue to be a site available as draft master plan is available, and as well as these concepts that'll be coming out to kind of get feedback from people on what those ideas are. I'll walk through the agenda here. Project planning and background, we'll touch on that as a recap. We'll talk about the master plan process itself and kind of how that right now, where we're at in the process and where we're kind of head towards the fall. We'll talk about evaluation and what sort of feedback summaries we have heard from community members and TAC and DAC participants so far. We'll talk a little bit about the corridor analysis and some pilot studies that we've done kind of in between our last meeting and now that are starting to shape kind of a vision or design alternative that we have for a regional trail facility. And then we'll do, like I mentioned, vision breakout sessions. So we'll last time we kind of broke into 3 groups by the median typologies, so to speak. Each of these are going to be a little different. The same content is going to be in each breakout room, but it gives us and everybody a chance to look at all the different sort of concepts and weigh in. We'll have a little bit longer time to move through those ideas and then brainstorm in small groups and report back. All right, a little bit on project introduction. So for planning context on this, in the St. Paul Comprehensive Plan or 2040 Comprehensive Plan, Summit Avenue is identified as regional trail search corridor as an important linking trail in the Twin Cities, really linking regional park amenity trails as the Mississippi River Boulevard and the Sam Morgan. Regional trail search corridors are really selected for their ability to intersect with local trail networks and serve many different routes for commuting, like bicyclists, but also for recreational purposes. So Summit currently functions very well for that right now. It's heavily used for transportation commuting as well as recreation. And so as a regional trail search corridor, this is that next step where we would look at potentially what a regional trail facility would look like in this corridor, what the feasibility looks like, what are the issues and constraints with that. A second planning document reflecting the regional trail search corridor is the Regional Parks Policy Plan with Metropolitan Council. And again, that's a guiding document for 2040, and that kind of sets the process for trail master plans and regional park amenities, such as a regional trail. Where we're at right now, we're really at a turning point in design where we're going to be sharing potential concepts, as I mentioned, getting feedback on those from community members, as well as internally with TAC groups and design advisory community stakeholder groups, and then really kind of help see where we can advance some progress on a master plan for that this summer. I'll touch on some area projects that are occurring in and around this. I think it just helps provide context on what the master plan is working towards and where some built construction work is going to be happening in and around Summit. So the green line here, that is the regional trail master plan extents. It's a high level process visioning look. We'll be making again some high level recommendations about a trail facility and weighing those alternatives. It is unfunded for construction, so it's a master plan process from 2021 to 2022 and setting that. The other items you see kind of in a green color, so to speak, or teal, if you will, those do have construction components to it. Those are led by Public Works as capital projects. A mill and overlay is set to occur Snelling to Lexington in 2022. So surface improvements there, restriping. So same existing conditions, but hopefully much improved, taking some most potholes out. I know it's a big issue and concern, the surface roadway. So that's a very good thing. And then plan for a full reconstruction is Lexington to Victoria as part of Public Works capital planning for 2023. So that includes utility work, lighting, sort of, again, that full kind of reconstruction, curb to curb, sidewalks, roadway as well. So, and then nearby, but not on Summit, the Grand Avenue reconstruction is planned from Fairview to Snelling in 2024. All right, touch a little bit on master plan areas. So, you know, when we talk about the regional trail search corridor, that's that envelope. We're then kind of dialing in on Summit Avenue itself, and how Summit Avenue is sort of characterized. Generally speaking, again, this is very general, but the right-of-way conditions for Summit Avenue are characterized by sort of two right-of-way conditions. There's a 200-foot right-of-way from Lexington to the Mississippi River Boulevard. East of Lexington, we have a 100-foot right-of-way. So two different available right-of-ways that we're working within to kind of chart what this regional trail facility could look like and how traffic and operations are moving in there. But generally, those are kind of two characterizations of the corridor. When we break that down a little further, in that 200-foot right-of-way, there's a single median condition where you have characterized by a really large 90-foot center median. And then we also have double median conditions. So there's a stretch where that center area kind of splits, becomes two different medians, and then comes back together again beyond that before it hits Lexington. So back to a single median. So a little bit unique, obviously makes for very unique transitions and things we want to be mindful of as we're designing and making sure that we can create safer transitions through these spaces for bicycles and pedestrians. I'll highlight over on the right here, the area from Kellogg. So as part of the regional trail, it is that connection to downtown and to the Sam Morgan Regional Trail. But the legs on Kellogg and Eagle Parkway are really going to be characterized by either current existing conditions, which is Eagle Parkway has a shared use trail facility. So that cross section is somewhat already defined. And then Kellogg Boulevard will be defined by the planning process for Capital City Bikeway. So what we're really looking at, or more in detail, what we're looking at are places that don't have that planned trail facility yet in place, or that it has on-street bikeways currently. We're looking for a separated bikeway to increase pedestrian safety. So that kind of highlights what we're looking at in general. It's a 5.4 mile corridor. In the upper left here, when we get to the actual master plan document this summer, when those are under review, we'll start to break down areas by kind of A, B, C, D. So that's kind of a keynote up there just for reference. We won't get quite that granular here today. We'll mostly look at the two different types, 100-foot and 200-foot, but just as a note for when master plan document comes out, we'll kind of move along that way. All right, so some of the project goals and context here. It's, as I mentioned, a really important link for the Parks and Trails Network in the metropolitan region. We're really looking to balance many of the priorities that exist within Summit. So ways to balance needs for traffic calming, safety improvements, and identify how we can also modernize infrastructure and bring a more improved connective space to public open space there. We recognize Summit is an incredibly important place, and we want to make sure that whatever goes in really complements that and fits with the historic character of Summit Avenue. So really being conscious about what is planned and what is proposed to really come alongside what is great already. The project schedule. So fall, we kind of kicked off community engagement, and through the winter, we've been looking at existing conditions and analysis and really connecting with stakeholder groups, building our design advisory committee group with representatives at various district councils and community stakeholder groups, really identifying where corridor opportunities and constraints are, really trying to understand those transition areas and where traffic concerns are, or where we know we need to plan for improvements. And then winter and spring. So again, gathering feedback from community groups has been really important. That Engage St. Paul website has been very helpful in understanding where hotspots are, where people see interest in improvement, or where they don't, where they want to make sure that things are continued to leave as is, or make sure that we improve upon that. And then now we're really shifting for summer to develop these trail concepts and get feedback and then get that draft master plan out kind of in summer for public comment. And then once we get those processes underway, once we get feedback on it and refine the master plan, we'd be looking to move through approvals this fall. And so the various committees commissions, I should say, that would weigh in on that are HPC, the St. Paul Transportation Commission, Parks and Recreation, St. Paul City Council, and then the Metropolitan Council Parks and Open Space Commission. All right, touch on evaluation. Here we go. All right, we'll make sure a little time checking. We want to move along here so we can get conversation going. There's been a lot of great community engagement that's been a part of this process. We're hearing from many different community members. Certainly huge priorities in green space and protection and preservation of what exists in the corridor. Really seeing the parkway function as a park experience and the importance of that, and making sure that that is a part of this process and embedded in this process, which it certainly is, and making sure that we continue that as we move forward with design ideas, making sure that we complement that. Safety, so a lot of concern about the cars moving too fast, proximity of pedestrians to vehicles and crossings in particular being of concern, and turning movements. Really a desire for more separation between cars, bicycles, and peds, door swing conflicts, things like that with existing bike lanes. And then a lot of concern about the facility conditions. So paving the road, pave the road, that's a big concern. Surface conditions being poor and wanting that to be a better experience and increase use that way. Walkway and paving conditions as well, just tripping concerns, things like that. The wider sidewalks east of Dale, that character in the corridor is really highly desirable. The pedestrian realm is really important. I think that that's something certainly in the context of a regional trail, we'd be looking for bicycle facilities as well as pedestrian facilities. So that's an important part of that whole picture of what a regional trail serves. It's pedestrians and bicycles. And then noting unpaved services. So the median itself functioning as a really important treadway, that sort of center user driven or user created pathway down the center is really important. It's charming, it's unlike any feature. So making sure that we're conscious of that and keeping it intact. And then no change, very concerned about changing the corridor, keeping things as they are. There's certainly an important function to the historical context and the parkway context of the corridor. So making sure that surface repairs are the priority. So we're hearing quite a bit from many different perspectives on it. It's a well-loved space, and so we want to be conscious of that. I will touch on some of these hotspots from the online survey, where we're seeing people really see interest in improvements or areas where there are concerns. I think in general, safety in intersections is really important. The value of parking green spaces, so green spaces that are either currently well used and loved or ones that maybe are underutilized, where people can see Summit functioning as an important connection to really create more opportunity for green spaces and bringing people to those spaces. So connections and transitions too. For example, the Ide Mill, a lot of desire of connecting to that current bikeway or recently designed, implemented bikeway. And so just making that a more accessible experience. And then parking functions and conflicts. So certainly near universities and where there are conflicts with on-street bikeways adjacent to parking or in between through travel and parking. So survey participation has been good. I think we have a little over 800 participants in the survey across community members. Again, we'll kind of keep that door open and want people to continue to engage through that. But here's kind of a breakdown of who's participated so far. A lot of community engagement conversation happening too. Huge concern about trees and planting. And again, I want to just reiterate that is integral to this process. We certainly recognize that, the importance of that, and what you'll see in these concepts. We're really moving to keep that as a priority and complement that. Concerns about traffic and pavement, curb walks, crossings at the median, so people kind of going from median to median, so to speak, as a concern. Just kind of touch point on that. Again, reiterating that green space is integral to the design. So what you'll see here when we get to the concepts rolling out are really focusing on the existing paved space and where we can create or reallocate more pedestrian and bicycle friendly facilities, making sure that we're really conscious of that edge and where those edge of curbs are to maintain green spaces and making sure that that's integral. The medians themselves are, again, those sort of user-driven pathways have endured time, certainly. We've seen that in aerial photographs dating back. I think that that's a really important space and will continue to be an important space. So again, we're going to be looking at these paved areas and how they function, how we can kind of bring people up to create more of a separated bikeway, but within that paved surface. Just to touch a little bit on the historic district. So there's two different historic districts spanning Summit Avenue, the West Summit Avenue Historic District and the Historic Hill District. So we know that the historic context of it is incredibly important. Whatever changes are made certainly are part of that. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from our friends on the call from SHPO as well as HPC, who can kind of speak through, you know, where these ideas might be headed and how that that context of historical context overlays with that. In our historical analysis tech memo, you know, the grand and noteworthy public street is a factor from early planning. So this is certainly a cultural landscape. We can see that 100-foot pattern and the 200-foot spatial pattern dating back to, you know, 1888 in the early layout and Sanborn maps. And so spatial organization of land patterns is really important. And so we want to be conscious of that. Again, that's another reason why we're going to be looking at those paved sort of transportation treadways as our focus of locating the regional trail and making sure that we keep our medians and the green spaces available and in pattern with historical context. Renee, is there anything, I know Renee's on the call, who led the way from Bolton and Menk from a historical perspective. Is there anything you want to add? I just want to give that plug. It's okay if no, I know that's all right too, but just want to give that opportunity.
I think you covered the high points very well.
Great, thanks Renee. Again, just reiterating the importance of the green space in this corridor, the urban canopy. I think the shadows that are created, what this place does to create really a highly desirable park experience and parkway experience for all modes and users. We want to maintain that and we want to make sure we're complementing it. Existing conditions, the Aid Mill Bridge I mentioned as a fairly recent reconstruction in the corridor. And the desire for connections to that as part of sort of planning processes or recognizing an opportunity there for bicyclists and pedestrians to connect to other parts of the city. Touchdown surface conditions and paving. I think this particular image is Lexington to Victoria. So certainly interest in reconstructing and modernizing those conditions where we can. The upper right here, you'll see that kind of 10-foot sidewalk characterization, the beauty and comfort of that 10-foot pedestrian realm that exists east of Dale is highly desirable. And again, those sort of user-driven paths through the park landscape is really important. I'll switch to some of the concerns we've heard from maintenance perspective, certainly in winter. Summer conditions, it's probably more about proximity, speed of cars and proximity to cars, parked cars. But in winter conditions, there's certainly concern of snow removal and being able to utilize these facilities year round as for bicycles and pedestrians. And certainly it's used as soon as the snow falls. So people are out, people are moving on it. It's a great community space. And with that, I want to transition to trail concept evaluation objectives. So we are really trying to seek a balance of many different objectives in the corridor. There's a lot of competing priorities, of course. A large priority is to increase pedestrian and bicycle safety and create a comfortable trail experience that can really be an all ages facility, kind of meet that 8 to 80 need for bicycles and pedestrians to be able to enjoy Summit Avenue and enjoy that parkway corridor. So we really want to support it. It already is a high quality experience in this corridor, and we want to make that a high quality regional trail experience as well. And making sure that whatever's proposed is compatible with historic context. Where you're going to see in these concepts where we're starting to have challenges, you know, in design or beginning to weigh a little more are these impacts to vehicle parkings and functions. You'll see that kind of play out in the concepts and in options where we have option to retain some parking and an option to remove parking in select areas to create the trail space. So you'll see that kind of play through, but again, really trying to seek that balance of meeting as many objectives as we can and minimizing impacts where we're able to. A little bit deeper dive on parking. So another study, in addition to some of the historic context that was studied earlier this year, is a parking evaluation. So there's actually 2 studies that have been done at the city relative to parking. One as part of the master plan and one earlier in January 2020 that predates the master plan. That was an overnight parking restriction study. So this was in response to a study for improved roadway maintenance for facilities on Summit Avenue. This looked at corridor wide, I should say, parking and hours collected. Again, it was an overnight parking study, so 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. In July through September. So on 6 different occasions, kind of looking at general utilization rates. Overall, parking utilization for this overnight was observed 50% along most of Summit Avenue. It was consistently above 75 near Dale, and then 50% near University of St. Thomas when school was in session. So a few different snapshots of utilization corridor wide. The second parking study was an analysis specific to this master plan where we took another look, and especially this was particular in the 100-foot right of way where we know we're kind of most constrained. We wanted to see, a snapshot of parking and utilization. So parking utilization here looked at Lexington to Selby. 8 different collection times occurred as part of this study. And key findings were that in this part of the corridor was generally modest, probably average about 30% over the whole study area. Consistent with the previous study, the area near Dale was consistently a high usage point. So given those preliminary studies, we're starting to look at, again, these paved surfaces and how can we prioritize green space, preserve that mature landscape. I think that's something really important about Summit Avenue that may be different to other places. And there's a lot that's amazing and different about Summit, but the mature landscape features of it are really important as we start to look at those curb edges. We want to be conscious of making sure we're minimizing moving that because of mature landscape and critical routes. So that's a big priority. And then looking to reallocate existing transportation spaces so that we can provide a separated bikeway and the walkways themselves as part of that regional trail facility to serve bike and peds. With that, we'll talk about, again, a key component to all concepts that you'll see today are this idea of retaining parking on both sides or potentially removing on one side and what that looks like and how that could play out. The other key piece you'll see are 2 different trail styles, so to speak, each pretty different. One we're looking at is a one-way style trail facility, which is really complementary to what exists now on street, but it brings it up above the curb, provides some more separation between vehicles and bicycles. So the one-way trail style facility, excuse me, find a glass of water here. The one-way style is looking at how that shift would occur. So what you see here on screen is in that 100-foot right-of-way, again, our sort of narrowest right-of-way condition. How that shift would occur is, potentially we're looking at one side or 50%, so to speak. It doesn't necessarily have to be all on one side. The way that the traffic could work, you kind of have a break kind of mid-block and are able to transition those facilities as needed. So kind of a context-based approach to parking or reallocating parking. And again, the one-way style, you see two one-ways, so to speak, or a paired one-way style facility, similar to what's out there now. The next one, oops, the two-way style, a little bit different. It's a two-way, so both bicycle directions are on one side. The sidewalks remain as that pedestrian facility. The same strategy could be utilized for parking to try and, again, chicane throughout that section. It's worth noting too, this is a diagram, but this wouldn't occur every single block. You could span it as needed. Again, more of a context-based look that could occur relative to where parking needs are needed to be met. So That is that concept. And with that, I'll shift to the conceptual bike trail alternatives that we're looking at. Again, there's sort of two different facilities types you'll see play out. The one-way style facility type and then the two-way style facility type. And we'll kind of run through the 200-foot right-of-way first. So that's 200 are areas with the large medians and the double medians. So let's just see. So existing conditions in that 200-foot right-of-way. In the upper right, there's a kind of a key marker of where these conditions exist in the corridor. And then we have a sort of generic space here where we're looking at in that 200-foot right-of-way. So zeroing in on these are one-way roads, so to speak, a one-way framing that center median space. And so again, we're looking at this paved area and how we reallocate to create trail space. Existing conditions, we have an on-street buffer here, buffered bike lane, again, between parked cars and a through travel lane. But there's sufficient area to create a buffer between the bikeway here, again, on street. You'll note in the legend here on all of these graphics, the existing curb line and the potential impact zone. That's where we're really thinking about those curb edges and how each facility type kind of moves that and adjusts. We want to obviously minimize that movement as much as we can, but we also need to make sure that we're creating a space or a trail facility that's comfortable, that makes sense as far and meets design guidelines, as well as roadway design guidelines for parking and through travel and emergency access and all that fun stuff. So here's the one-way pairing in this section, and an example of a one-way separated trail with parking on both sides. So keeping parking functionality or roadway functionality as it is, and introducing a one-way separated trail on either side, and what you'll see reflected here. Again, kind of area 1 and 2, with the center median here. Our impacts you'll start to see in red. They vary, but generally speaking, this particular style, we'd be looking at 1 to 2 feet. And I will say too to any of my colleagues as I'm kind of going through these, if I miss something, please feel free to jump in, or if I'm just needing another sip of water. The next one we'll look at is a two-way separated trail with parking on one side. We have that same, of course, 200-foot right-of-way. So functionality remains on one side, but looks at removing parking on the other side. So 200-foot right-of-way, again, those existing curb lines. What's interesting about this particular design, it provides an additional green space on one side and maintains the existing curb lines as is. So a little bit different style or functionality. I should say that something that's going to repeat in all of these, some of these standards are a buffer. We need about a 4-foot buffer for maintenance on all of these. So you'll see that edge here are called out a buffer. Some it can vary depending on if we have space, we can make it wider, but at least 4 feet is necessary for maintenance. All right, 200-foot right of way. So now we're looking at the double median. So this is those situations where we have obviously the large, we had the large 90-foot median, and then we split. We kind of have those unique transitions to where through traffic comes through the middle of the medians, and we have frontage roads on the outside. So we'll kind of share what those facility styles look like here. Again, there's your main through travel is kind of between the medians. Current conditions are on-street bikeways. We do still have those buffered bike lanes exist, kind of held tight to the curb. Parking does not exist in this center area. However, it does on the frontage roads in this particular segment. So looking at a one-way separated trail, what that would look like with a 200-foot right-of-way, we kind of, again, have similar functionality to what is there now, but bringing those spaces up above the curb and providing more separation for vehicles. These are shown at, I believe, a 7-foot width, and part of that is for continuity of the recreational style facility. We know many riders like to ride side by side or make sure there's passing. So that's what you see again illustrated here. Again, with this one-way style, we start to see those impacts about 3 to 4 feet on either side and maintaining that 4-foot buffer. And don't worry if these all aren't sinking into, just it will be in the mural board, so we'll kind of get to dive in a little bit further, but I want to at least give folks a preview before we dive to that. So the next one is the two-way style facility, two-way separated trail. Again, focusing on that center area, but bringing all uses kind of pulled to one side within that center space. What we see here, because parking isn't present, we can shift those drive lanes over, create a buffer, and have a a two-way trail and maintain our existing curb lines to work within that envelope. The 100-foot right-of-way, so Lexington Parkway to Kellogg Boulevard. So here's where we kind of narrow down. We're beyond the median. We don't have a median here. We'll start to take a look at what those one-way and two-way style facilities start to do. All right. So existing conditions, here's where our striped buffer that exists on the others does not exist. So we have our 5-foot on-street bike lane between parking and through traffic. Characterizes this area. I think it's certainly worth noting that the sidewalk varies in this stretch. East of Dale, we have those 10-foot walks, and then west of Dale, it can be 10, sometimes depends on where you are, but primarily is a 6-foot walk. So again, just noting that is important because those pedestrian realms are certainly a part of this regional trail facility. We're just focusing right now on the bikeway design and where those improvements can be made. The one-way separated trail, how that would overlay in here, you can see what we have parking on one side, so one side of parking, or again, that chicane can occur, but 1 or 50% of the parking, so to speak, would be removed and maintained on one side. Impacts vary with this one-way style facility from 2 to 3 feet, and again, that same buffer exists here. This next one is not recommended due to potential boulevard impacts, but we want to at least share it for sake of certainly the items that we're looking into or how that would overlay. So this is maintaining parking on both sides. We start to get more significant impacts to that curb edge. And again, just reiterating the importance of that curb edge in how we want to make sure we're minimizing how much that's moving. This starts to get into 6 or 7 feet. And so that is not recommended because again, we're dealing with a mature landscape and we want to make sure we're minimizing that curb movement. So that's what a one-way style would look like if parking remained. The two-way trail, keeping parking on one side, we're able to create again, a buffer, a two-way facility, but maintain the existing curb line. And then if we keep parking on both sides and have a two-way style facility, we have lesser impacts to that curb edge. We're more in the 3 to 4 foot realm to be able to keep that functionality and maintain parking. And with that, I know it's a lot of content, but again, those will be available in the Miro boards and our smaller groups. We'll start to kind of look at that and talk through the benefits and drawbacks of all of these as ideas and just hear what people think. So with that, I think we're going to structure it into 2 main groups. We'll keep the 200-foot right-of-way folks together. That group will be led by myself, Cody, if you want to raise your hand, or folks will be there. And then Scott and Katie will be in that group, sort of facilitating conversation. And then the 100-foot right-of-way will be characterized by Brett, and Maddie will be leading the way on that one. So we're going to have 2 kind of big conversations. I believe it'll automatically split, right, Michaela?
Yep, correct. Once you're ready, I'll open all the rooms and everyone will automatically be put into their breakout room.
Okay, that sounds good. So we'll do about 30 minutes or so. We could probably run a little longer since we're going to have two rooms. We were going to do 3 at one point, but Michaela will be our friend and kind of jump in and help us make sure we're on time and keeping us rolling. So with that, I will see folks on the other side in group A. And Brett and Maddie, you guys will see folks in group B. And then we'll come back to the main space and we'll all kind of report out and share what we learned.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to open the rooms.
All right. Thank you. All right, sorry about that. Karen, we were kind of mid-thought in our room. Looks like we're back. We were just having some good conversation about crossings in the median. So kind of those multiple, just for everyone's awareness, the kind of shorter or less traveled, unsignalized, that's the word, unsignalized crossings throughout medians. If at a high level, those could be closed. Karen, do you want to finish your thought on that at all? We can kind of make sure we're noting it.
Sure. I guess like my main comment is that like I've heard some other people say that they really like how you guys are trying to make this feel more like a park. And I think if you're gonna do that, like why not just go all the way and connect the medians with green space on those like really slow traffic streets. That'll make it feel far more like a park, and it might just reduce some of the vehicle crossing conflicts that could happen just because there will be less turns for the cars to make. I just really don't think it's needed from a vehicle perspective. I mean, those like one-way side streets, like I never see cars on those, like just rarely. And if you really want to make this into a regional trail that's safe for bikes, safe for pedestrians, and is de-emphasizing and slowing traffic, I think, connecting the medians will, and just like, making more green space at those intersections will help a lot.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate that. I think that's certainly an important part of that park experience, and kind of going back to like the parkway and the parkway experience and that pedestrian realm. I think that's very helpful to hear and think about from a traffic perspective. I know we didn't get a volunteer in our group to report out, at least at this point. Last call, anyone from group A that wants to sort of summarize the high points we talked about? If not, I'll play that role. All right, fair enough. Okay, so in group A, we were talking about here. I'll share my screen here shortly. All right, so everyone see that okay? All right, so group A, we had a great group. We were talking, we didn't make it all the way to the 100-foot right of way. Unfortunately, we were working through the medians and all that good stuff. But I think some similar themes emerged. So on our one-way bicycle facility, as we looked at the median spaces, we talked a bit about those relationships to the curb. Forestry brought up certainly east of Lexington, we have a little more maybe a tighter conditions or more mature landscape. Again, the specifics aren't there, but certainly something to be conscious of east of Lexington. The consideration of residential driveways, so how these trail facilities would function at driveways, and where we would be maybe have more potential conflicts in those scenarios would be with a two-way style facility. So from kind of the different types of facilities, when you have counter traffic, that was flagged as maybe a less desirable situation from the traffic flow perspective, the two-way facility. Let's see, what else? I'm chasing our post-it notes here. We had a lot of good conversation down around the two-way style facility. Understanding that parking, we want to make sure it's really important, obviously. Parking proximity to Grand is important. I think it sounded like at least that it was a good thing, at least some parking functionality is maintained in all these concepts, knowing that it's not necessarily an easy situation, but eliminating it entirely would be very problematic. I think, let's see, what else? We talked about the benefits just of the regional trail facility, so being maintained year round versus what exists currently, and then creating more space or more separation between vehicles and kind of that buffer space we talked about a little bit. Again, kind of nervous about biking against traffic. So kind of going in traffic conflict was something we took a look at just in general, kind of how a two-way style facility could function. Is that showing up on screen, by the way? Okay, there's kind of a traffic diagram. Okay. So we looked a little bit, we don't have one of these illustrated for the one-ways. The one-ways would follow similar transition patterns or function patterns that are there currently. So just trying to understand what a two-way, if we were to push a trail facility to a side, kind of how that would transition, especially some of these areas where we have, the large median to a double, what would that look like? How would that improve crossing conditions at Snelling or some of these other transition points in the corridor? That being Lexington being the last one we looked at, kind of pulling that over and kind of bring these together on one side and creating designated crossing there. So I'll jump back to the Miro board. I'm trying to think of anything else. And then at the end, yeah, Karen, thank you for speaking to, again, that interest in the park-like experience and potential to kind of close unsignalized crossings and really connect more green spaces together. The importance of it, being a well-loved historical area and really bringing that park people first experience back to the corridor was something people were interested in. Anything I missed for my group? Anyone want to chime in? Some of the high points? All right. All right, and with that, I'll turn it over to Group B. Share what you learned in Group B.
Sure, this is Jimmy. I have some notes here, but rest of the group, feel free to jump in. We started looking at the 100-foot right-of-way. I think in both the 100-foot and 200-foot cap region watershed liked the two-way because of its limited impact on green space. I think there was a question about how does adding green space change the historical character. So I think Allison mentioned that, in whatever way it shakes out, if we're adding green space and it creates kind of an asymmetry from historical preservation, that could be an issue because the symmetry is actually part of the historical character. Some other folks mentioned when we have 12-foot drive lanes, how do emergency vehicles or delivery vehicles function? If there's a median there, does that mean that they're loading or unloading in that one vehicle lane? Also a question about how just the different, this kind of comes back to, the different users, even the sub-users of bicyclists operate or use the corridor. So if we remove it if we change how it currently is, how do different users and even sub-users of the same mode of bikers use it? There was some discussion about kind of safety concerns from one-way versus two-way. Mary mentioned that, but Public Works Traffic mentioned that, for left turning vehicles, it's easy to understand in a one-way when a biker is coming towards you, but if a biker is coming behind you and you're taking a left, there's some concern there that, maybe some, people might eventually figure it out, but it is a change regardless from what is currently out there. And so that could be a learning curve and potential safety concern. What else? There was just a note from Glad Metro Transit was on the call talking about how UST St. Thomas uses Summit for turnarounds and layovers, I think, or used to or currently does. And then just how Metro Transit crosses Summit with their different lines. I don't know, what else am I missing, Group B?
Yep, I think that was a pretty good overview. And I think to Jimmy's comments, I think we had some similar comments across the segments that we looked at. We also had very limited conversation about the 100-foot right of way, just because we ran out of time. But yeah, a lot of the conversation was around driver expectation and what's expected. And then I think to just build on what Jimmy said, talking more about, or maybe exploring more of who is the anticipated user and therefore which facility type would be most, I don't know, maybe most welcoming, I guess would be the word, to that user group, or, you know, who are we creating this for, and how will this support or not support?
Yeah, I think it, like, going even further, like, who are we anticipating, and who do we want to use it?
Yep.
You know, so like if we design a certain facility, it would encourage or entice some people to use it, whereas another facility might not.
Yeah. We also talked about the implementation that came up of, we want to create a high quality experience for the whole length of the trail, and knowing that we only have the one segment currently scoped for a construction project, how do we make sure it's still a high quality experience in the interim before the trail is realized across the whole extents?
A comment. There's been no discussion at all of the different winter conditions. We've been talking as though it's perpetual summer around here.
Yeah, I think one thing that our group also talked about was the maintenance, and just maintenance requirements for a two-way and one-way, but also kind of maintenance, not necessarily maintenance requirements, or kind of like what might be expected in that winter use, where, you know, if you have a very heavy snowfall in a one-way use, maybe the snow, I think the comment was the snow maybe would cover the one-way cycle track, whereas in a two-way it would only cover half of it. I think from the project team side of that, I think maintenance is certainly something that we're looking into, both with the width of those buffers, but then also what's the maintenance of the regional trail, you know, knowing that would have to be maintained in a clear and usable state.
Yeah, and I don't know if like a two-way, to say that the snow would only be thrown on a two-way for half of it, I don't know if we should call that like a benefit.
Yeah.
You know, like we should maintain it, you know, and make sure it's rideable, one-way or two-way, as opposed to saying that half of the two-way is covered by snow and that's acceptable.
Yeah, and I think that was just kind of the offhand comment that was made. But yeah, certainly, Jimmy, you're right.
Yeah.
If we're creating a regional trail, there are certain maintenance expectations that follow that.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. And I think it's an important logistical piece, certainly, between, you know, public works maintenance and how the logistics of clearing that road happens, and then parks comes through. So I think it also just drives home the importance of that buffer in between, and making sure that that's adequate. You know, whatever concepts we're looking at, whether it's a two-way or a one-way, that needs to be sufficient for both, in order to meet those expectations that we have a facility that's cleared year round. So yeah, very good point. You mentioned implementation. I think just kind of coming back, I know it sounds like both groups maybe didn't quite get to the 100-foot, probably a lot of similar themes, concerns. Obviously it's a more narrow or more constrained, but it's also a segment that is sort of slated for reconstruction in 2023. So I think this would be a good time to just kind of talk about implementation. Was there anything, Maddie, in your group, you kind of touched on it, and ours, I know we talked too about whether or not multiple facility types would be preferred in the corridor. Would that need to happen? Could you have a one-way where it's appropriate, or a two-way? Did anything like that come up in conversation? I think we talked about the importance of continuity where you can, but recognize impacts are also really important.
Yeah, yep. We had a comment come up early on, or a comment or question of just, are we looking at, you know, we're looking at these in separate segments, but are we ultimately looking to identify one type across the entire project extents. And kind of our comment back was just that, you know, we're still exploring that currently. From what it looks like currently, we could potentially switch trail types if we needed to, but likely that wouldn't occur within that 200-foot right-of-way, right? So just looking at the transitions of how those spaces would connect, it would be pretty challenging to switch trail types, you know, in those segments with the medians. If we needed to make a switch from one-way to two-way, we could potentially do that between the no median to the median conditions, knowing that we're kind of making that switch at a signalized intersection, which might provide some opportunity to move people around safely where they need to get to.
Got it. That is helpful. And I know, you know, implementation and kind of how this gets rolled out over time, obviously, is also a big part of sort of decision making and style of facility. We think about kind of how a segment gets constructed. There will be existing conditions that exist for a certain amount of time, and we want to make sure that we can do that as comfortably and as seamlessly as possible over time. So that is something certainly to consider in whatever facility type that is proposed. Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have another comment. Kind of going back to something you talked about at the beginning with your parking study and how it's like used like less than 50% of the time. You know, I have a lot of like, I'm not sure that I like either one better than the other, but I do have really big concerns over like the two-way like intersections. And I think like you should really be making your decision on which form is going to work based on like just how safe those intersections can be. You know, and I think like one of the reasons this feels like a historic area is, I mean, it's primarily because the houses there are old, right? I think it has far less to do with like the pattern of the street than it does like the fact that the houses are just old and the trees are super mature. So it feels like a neighborhood that's been around. So, you know, comments from forestry that, you know, this two one-way scenario could damage the trees. I mean, that's a concern. You don't really want to damage the existing trees because then you're gonna like lose a lot of the historic feel right away. And it'll just be like a less pleasant park. But, you know, I just keep coming back to thinking about that parking study. And if you really have goals of making this a park for like pedestrians, bicyclists, like who cares about losing parking in any scenario? Like, it just doesn't seem like there's a high need. I'm sure you're going to make some people upset by getting rid of it, but like there's such a small % of the users then on this space, and our society caters to parking cars all the time. Like, I think maybe you could even look at removing more parking, just if you, in order to make that like the two one-way scenario work. Just a thought. There's plenty of side street parking. And like, you know, thinking about in the campus areas too, they've got parking garages, they've got off-street lots. Like, I don't like the available parking for those people anyway. Like, it's not like the whole campus can get to park on those streets. So maybe just make it like, get rid of it altogether.
Karen, this is Luke with the Watershed District. I just want to reflect a couple of things that you said back. The campus, USD, students aren't allowed to park in that area. That's permit parking throughout the day. So any removal of parking would not affect the university in any appreciable way, as you said. Second, I mentioned this in the chat to Maddie, the two-way facility would allow some preservation of parking in the high use area, the Dale Street area. That seemed to be the only area that there was a high demand for parking. So that's to me the only area where parking preservation should be prioritized in any way. There's a lot of multifamily apartment buildings there. And so if you did a two-way, then you could have parking maintained and have some green space impacts in that area. And then for the rest of that right of way, just remove parking in a single location on a single side and still have the two-way with minimal green space impacts. And then finally, I think there is a lot of concern about safety at the intersections with the two-way. Karen's idea about having fewer intersections is, I think, a really good one, fewer uncontrolled intersections. And then a change in signalization might address that concern. If there's a separate bike signal, then there's not going to be any conflicts, because bikes will go and cars will be stopped, and then cars will go and bikes will be stopped.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Karen. I appreciate that. I know we have about 10 minutes left, so I want to make sure, again, if there are other comments here on the 100-foot right of way, we don't anticipate having all the answers after this. Of course, there will be a follow-up survey after this meeting, so we'll have about a week to think on that and share thoughts.
Yeah, this is Sarah. I just thought it'd be important to clarify Karen perception of just the houses that are important here. And I think the city of St. Paul and Mary and your group understand that the National Register district includes, and you talked about that at the very beginning, it's a district, so it has many components. It's the houses, it's the rhythm of how things are laid out, from the street to the curb to green space, sidewalks, setbacks of houses, all of that. And the landscape is contributing to the historic district. So I think that's an important thing to remember here. And that's all been talked about in our group, and the symmetry. And yeah, a little bit more ways to go on that, but it's important to clarify that.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. Is there anything, I know all of these concepts kind of show a buffer or a green buffer. I know that, again, coming back to kind of the pattern in the landscape, would priority say if that were put in, is the balance or the symmetry created kind of that defining piece? Like, could you move forward? Again, I know these are pretty high level ideas, but this idea of introducing new green space as a good thing, right? Of more park or more parkway.
Yep, we talked about that. Yeah, with it depends it's going to kind of depend on which segment you're in, and sort of reiterating what is the historic character is what we see today. The historic character, of course, we know the roadway has been modified over several decades, but does that asymmetry, or can that buffer be treated in a different way that acts like green space, but maybe doesn't look like an additional green space? I don't know. Maybe there's other treatments that can be used that behave ecologically that way, but may not look like additional green space to counteract that asymmetry that you're trying to avoid.
Yeah, I agree with Sarah in that. And I think, it is hard to get too specific at this point, but like with what we're looking at on the screen right now, this is an easier one to distinguish in terms of, the existing curb is staying where it's at. So it's preserving that ratio. You aren't introducing a new kind of green space buffer, but that could easily be interpreted as not being part of the historic landscape of Summit. So like this scenario is a little bit easier than some of the other ones we saw, where it's building out the existing green space. And especially when we're not having that symmetry as well, because, one side might be excluding parking and having, a two-way, and another one might have different ratios on the other side. So it's a little imbalanced. So just something to think about. I think every post-it that's going to have my name on it is going to say something about green space and balancing. So I'm sorry about that, but
no, that's a good thing. That's what we want to hear,
And I will just plug, since this is still the brainstorming time of this whole project, that if you ever want to move this to Grand and get people to go on Grand Avenue to support economic development from the business side of things and add green space over there, you will not hear from me at all. So if you want to avoid me, go to Grand Avenue.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, all great comments. I will let kind of last call for sort of comments at this moment in time. Again, there'll be a follow-up survey here, but I'll just I'll pan back to the last slides in our presentation.
Mary, is there any plan to like do, and maybe this already exists, maybe I missed it, like almost an, could it be done like an audit or an assessment of potential tree loss under these 7 or 8 different alternatives? Or is that, you know, if we're talking about, if we're like debating between 5 feet versus 8 feet, you know, is there anything that we could look at and say, this is how many trees would be lost, or this is how many could be gained?
Yeah, at a master plan level, not likely. I mean, I think when you get down to, you know, the next step would be design and engineering, which is a ways off, right? To get to that level of detail of where impacts might be. So I think as a general approach, we're looking at like a tolerance of moving that curb and what those potential risks are, but I don't know that we would get to the granular at this level. I think we'd have to identify that at a design, you know, preliminary design kind of a facility, so to speak. So we're hoping at least to set some parameters at that edge that can give us guidance. And looking at where trees exist now, I mean, the pattern for the most part is the trees are consistent, but some are pulled, you know, closer to an edge than others. So it won't necessarily be a one size fits all either. So I don't know that we could get to that grain at this point.
I think
Mary, I will add.
Go ahead, Brett.
I will add to Jimmy's comment that we have identified some of the sections that we know will not work, and that's what we put, that they're not recommended because it would require significant tree removal. So those options have been removed.
So then is that, I mean, is that assuming that then all of the alternatives currently considered would have insignificant tree removal?
I think, oh, go ahead.
I'd be happy to jump in here. I mean, it's hard to know. We've sent over some data on critical root zones and structural root zones, but those can vary by species. So yeah, it's hard to know at this point. But certainly, you know, when I see changes of, 2, 3, 4 feet, in construction, that tells me, 3, 4, 5 feet with a good contractor, which gives me quite a bit of concern on like 100-foot zone, right? So I mean, I could see the tree impacts being quite significant. It's just a matter of what is that nuance, and without doing a more deep dive or a deeper dive into where those trees exist, the species, the cut on each one, it's hard to know. But I mean, seeing impacts like this, it's concerning.
Thank you for that clarification, Zach. I appreciate it. With that, I am going to transition here to our kind of last slide. Okay. And we only have a few minutes left. So I think we kind of went through, design benefits and drawbacks of each. I think we're certainly paying attention to those existing curb lines. We also want to think high level about creating those park experiences or maintaining the park-like experience and where we can enhance more pedestrian amenities in the corridor, just to really build up that priority of park-like space, and kind of shaping that public realm that exists now, but how can we kind of make that even more so park-like experience into the future with these facilities. All right, we did our breakout groups. I think for next steps, I mentioned a follow-up survey. So after this meeting, the recording and the slides will be posted to engagestpaul.org. So that is available. And then I will send a follow-up survey to participants here just to weigh in again, kind of some of those pros and cons. You'll have slide attachments for link to find those. And we'll give a week to get that back, get that feedback. May 25th, we have our design advisory committee. So Wednesday night, this is a group of community leaders and representatives throughout district councils and various stakeholder groups along Summit. So same presentation, same exercise, but we'll hear from community members at that time. And then June 6th, a public info session. So planning on having an opportunity again to, once these concepts are out, to hear from people and get more questions answered at that time. And then at that point, we'll have a fair amount of feedback. We'll get the draft master plan document itself up and available for a comment period, and then can shape the plan from that to have a public open house. So sometime this summer likely, and then move towards approval in the fall. Well, with that, we're pretty close to time. Any last thoughts? I'm looking forward to your follow-up surveys. I know it's hard having a 2-hour meeting, but I really appreciate people hanging in there. There's a lot of great content. It's a very special place, and one that we want to approach thoughtfully and to really create a wonderful space going forward, as much as it is now, that is accessible for everyone. So, other thoughts?
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Harry.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Y'all have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Absolutely.
you.
Take care.